Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another episode. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by friend of the show, Iztok Franko of Diggin' Basketball. Nobody is covering the Lakers the way that Iztok is doing it. Nobody's writing about the Lakers the way he is doing it. Just had a great story the other day, a check-in at the 70-ish, 71 game mark for the Lakers, going through several topics, then is doing his nightly coverage with his takeaways off of each game. Iztok, how you doing today, man?
Good.
I guess how you doing this evening? It's technically 9 p.m. where you're at.
Yeah. So it's getting later in the evening, but no, good. It's been finally a fun season. So
Finally, we're talking about it.
After a roller coaster, I think we deserved it, man. We deserved it.
After putting in a lot of work, a lot of long hours during the season, the last few weeks have been fun, as we were discussing before the show. But we did not plan the timing of this to talk after Lakers loss, but wanted to check in with you. And actually, I saw the last episode we did was back in early December or mid-December when the Lakers started that stretch where they had the Phoenix loss and the San Antonio loss, and that started a shift in their season where after the 15-4 start, they started to play some of the better teams in the league. They got blown out in a lot of those games. And we did an episode on how to fix the Lakers. I think they are fixed. I think they're in a good spot right now. And they did just have a tough loss last night to Detroit. But big picture, 13-5 coming out of the All-Star break, 12-2 over their past 14. They just had a 9-game win streak and a stretch of going 12-1 over 13 games. But with last night's game fresh on everybody's mind, what stood out to you? I know you had 5 takeaways off of last night's game, but what was like a big picture takeaway for you or something that stood out coming off of a close loss in Detroit?
Yeah, I think this team just looked tired. I think the schedule in March has been brutal. I think they played 14 games so far in 22 days or something like that. So and especially this road trip, they played like 5 playoff teams in 8 days. They were all battles, 2 games against Houston. Then they played all these other tough games against Eastern Conference team. And I think last night, I think we saw it even before how they started the game in Miami, how they played against Orlando. It wasn't pretty. So I think this team is ready to go back home. So I think they had a great, and this is something that happens to a lot of teams, NBA teams, when they're on the road trip. At the end of it, you start to look at it, and especially when you've been playing like they've been playing. So I think that was the one part, the biggest part. The other part is, and this is something that I wrote about in the past also, is the criteria in the NBA that changed around January. And I think this was exactly the game that is the best representative of these different kind of criteria, contact allowed. And I think last night, the criteria, and I don't want to blame the refs or anything. I just want to say that this was the game that Detroit wanted to play. And based on the physical state, also emotional, because I think Lakers, a lot of, let's say, emotional energy was spent in prior games. How the Lakers played this game, it was on Pistons terms, I would say, with all the contact that was allowed. And then the shot making was just off, especially Luka, but not only Luka. I think everybody else was very poor on most shots outside the rim, because Jackson and Nathan, they were great at the rim, but all others were missing shots. And then the fourth quarter turnovers. I think that stretch with 6 turnovers to open the fourth quarter, I think this is where they could build some separation. But they kept Detroit in, and then they were avoiding this in the clutch, and it's finally caught up.
Yeah, I think to your point, the fact that they had 8 of their 12 turnovers in the fourth quarter, plus they only shot 28% on threes, like those two stats to me are indicative of a team that was tired, right? And you had the first half where the big three go, I think a combined 7 for 28 in the first half. They're still only down 13, despite how poorly those three had been offensively. And then they have the big third quarter run. They get it to within 2 going into the fourth. But like you said, they had a slew of turnovers to open the fourth. They weren't able to create separation. Like that would have been the time theoretically to take a 6-point lead, 8-point lead, and then you ride this one out. But I mean, they've had so many close wins lately that thinking about the Denver game goes to overtime. You have the miraculous play from Austin. You have the game winner from Luka. You have the Houston game, the first one that went down to the wire. Lakers pull away the last couple minutes. The Orlando win. Like they had been showing some signs of fatigue and still being able to gut it out and beat an opponent in a close game. I feel like it finally caught up to them last night where they just were not quite able to get over the hump. And like Luka, Jenkins makes the shot. Luka gets Kevin Huerter on him, gets a mid-range pull-up shot, which he can hit with his eyes closed, misses the shot. And like that, that's the game right there. Right. So it just, you're not going to win every close game. They're 22-7 in the clutch, best clutch record in the NBA. Like, I don't want to overreact to last night's loss. So let's zoom out here and look at the bigger picture of how the Lakers have been playing. So I mentioned it, 13-5 since the All-Star break, 12-2 in their last 14, which included a stretch of going 12-1 in a 9-game win streak. Over that 12-1 stretch, top 3 in offense, top 7 in defense, top 5 in net rating, and then taking care of the ball, top 6 in turnover percentage, 6th in 3-point percentage, then also 6th in steals per 100 possessions, 11th in blocks per 100 possessions. Like they've been playing great basketball on both sides of the floor. You recently wrote about that with your check-in. But looking at this recent stretch here of, we could look post All-Star break. We could look at the 12-1 stretch, the 12-2 stretch, whatever. What has been your biggest takeaway or takeaways over this span, and just how transformative has this stretch been for the Lakers in terms of going from a team that had really struggled against a certain caliber of opponent to having a slew of statement wins and really remaking their perception, I think for themselves to some degree, but also league wide, of now they're just viewed in a different light than they were a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think in a way I don't know, that we watch or write or talk about the team, but especially the fans, I think we are often a little bit impatient when it comes to the typical NBA season. And especially for a new team, which this team actually was, if you consider that they added like Luka last year at the deadline, and then 2 new starters with now Smart and Nathan and Jake LaRavia, who I think is still 2nd in total minutes on the team. So these are like 3 of the top 6-7 players. I think this is matters even more. So I think what we saw in this last month is, and JJ talked about actually after the Detroit game, he said we got healthy. And once they got healthy, it wasn't only that. I think JJ also, and injuries sometimes prevented him to come to these solutions earlier, but at the end, I think also helped him a bit with Rui's injury, with LeBron's injury. They figured out some things. And I think this last month, it's just they figure out just some sort of a continuity and chemistry and lineup chemistry. So they figured out the starting 5. Then Ruiz coming on the bench. I think that was one of the biggest milestones that we were all waiting for. Marcus Smart, everybody healthy, LeBron coming back. Then with this short stretch where LeBron missed games, he coming back and then taking on different role. So all these little things, I think, added up that everybody, I think now when you look at the team, and if you talk about the Detroit game, you can see right away, just taking Marcus away, how all the dominoes are then disrupted. So I think where the team is healthy, with the starting 5, with the bench, I think JJ now is very comfortable how his lineups are looking, who is he playing in certain situations. And it's not only JJ, I think it's everybody. I was writing in my game observations a lot of times when Luka had these huge stretches, his scoring outburst. I think LeBron really helped him taking a step back, because you could see that even during the season, not that Luka was uncomfortable, but I think it wasn't in his total comfort zone. And now I think, especially the way he was playing, he assumed this, let's say, even bigger usage role, everything revolving around him. And I think it put him in the comfort zone. It's similar, I think it was with Austin and some other guys. So I think this was the key. And then a lot of the things, I think I wrote about it. I saw the discussion on Twitter about 3-point luck. Lakers have been shooting the free poorly before, and now they're one of the better teams. A lot of it comes from Luka because he's shooting like crazy volume at 38, 39% clip. But not also that. It's like, again, adding Rui, adding Kennard, replacing Kennard, Jakes and Vando minutes with Kennard, who is a great shooter. I think all this contributed to better 3-point shooting. And then on the defensive end, they had some luck. But again, I think defense, there are also some other indicators like we talked about. They turn over the ball less, which again, I think it's a byproduct of more Krill rows, even a little bit more heliocentric offense, because I wrote about historically, this is the offense. You can not like it stylistically, you cannot like it maybe in some other aspects, but when it comes to turnover rate, for example, Mavs Luka's team were always top 5 or even top 3 in turnover rate. So I think this was one part, but even more this continuity and chemistry, more defined roles. I think this is why they don't turn the ball over. And it directly affects that transition defense. They're much better in transition. They don't get ran out the floor. So it all these little things adding up. And I think, and of course, Luka has been playing like MVP, not even like an MVP, I think like the best player in the world for the last month. So I think that always helps in the NBA. When your best player is dominating, I think you will win a lot of games.
Looking at each of these factors, and again, to recap it, you wrote about looking at the West standings, Lakers point differential, 4 factors, some of the sacrifice and health and new roles within the rotation, Luka's MVP push, the threes and turnovers offensively, and then some of the 3-point defense and playmaking defensively, and the transition shift of being bottom 10 on both sides of the ball to being above average here recently on both sides of the ball. Among those factors, what do you think is sustainable? Is there something that you've seen here that you feel like, okay, this is just going to be the case moving forward, and this has been a real shift in a positive sense? And is there anything that you're concerned with that might not be sustainable, that maybe it is the 3-point shooting defense in LA benefiting from their opponents? Like you noted that they have, it's not just the 3-point shooting, it's been like the shot quality has been worse for their opponents. So they have been defending the line better, which is correlated with their opponent shooting worse. But like, is there something that stands out to you that's like, this has been a real development that I think will sustain the rest of the way? And then also, is there something that you're looking at of, I don't really trust this, I think it's a little fluky, maybe it's going to come back down to earth, and that's something that they're going to have to navigate over the final 10 plus games in the playoffs?
Yeah, I hope, as I said, I think them, and this is, I also wrote in the past when I compared, for example, Denver and the Lakers, why Denver is elite number 1 offense and why the Lakers were always, I don't know, at around 10, 7, 8 range, 6 spot, never top 5. And I think turnovers were the main issue. So I hope them, again, probably they will never be elite. They will not be a top 5 in terms of taking care of the ball. But if they are at around 10 and not bottom 5 or bottom 10 like they were, I think this is something that it can sustain. So, and this has been a trend that it's not like this last stretch, but I think it's been going on since the beginning of the year. So this is something that I think will help a lot, again, because I think we know there some of their issues with athleticism and transition game. This is something that it can help. Shooting, I think their own shooting, when we come to the 3-point range, I think, as I said, Luka's been shooting crazy, but again, he's been shooting not only last month, but basically, I think he's at 39% since January 1st. I think his shooting is always a little bit streaky, like every volume shooter. So that might not sustain. But if you look at last month, Austin was not shooting the free that well. So I think there are some things that that will, let's say, regress. But I think adding Kennard and Rui being two main players off the bench, this automatically lifts, I think, your shooting profile. So I think they will be a better shooting team. So I think this is also something that's more sustainable. As for defense, I think there is some, let's say, thing to be more worried about because, as I said, they had a lot of teams shoot very poorly. But we saw them beat some teams when they shot the ball well also during this stretch. I think one of the concerns, like you said, is health. I think how much they depend on Marcus and him playing 30 plus minutes, the way that he's playing, has sacrificing his body all the time. I think they are one Marcus injury away from having problems. So this is something. And again, I think the bench, if we are talking about now going into the playoffs, besides Rui, I think you have like three guys who are not really proven in a playoff environment. In terms, like, let's say, even Kennard, Jake, and Jackson, they've been all had great stretches off the bench, but when you look at the tough playoff series, there are some question marks. The same question marks that I think we all still have with Ayton. I think he has been up and down. He had great stretches, bad stretches. And I think part of this chemistry continuity is also JJ figuring out how to manage him. As you can see, he has like much shorter leash, but he will also put him back in the game. So I think he found how to motivate him for these good stretches at the end of games, which I think is the key for the Lakers because they need him. They need him against big guys like Duran, against Jokic, at least for key stretches that they really missed last year against Minnesota and against Gobert. But hopefully they can carry this over into the playoffs. But this will, I think, for Ayton, it will be a question mark as long as he is on this roster, I guess.
I'm with you. I think offensively, a lot of the progress we've seen with Luka, with the turnovers, with the shooting, JJ has adjusted the rotation and to your point, optimized the lineups, optimized the starting group. I mean, we had discussed the starting group multiple times and had been advocating for Marcus Smart to be the fifth starter. It took a little bit longer than I think most of us had hoped, but they finally got to that point, and it has been successful. Plus 11.3 net rating with that starting group, and I know they had the nice shift against a couple shifts against Chicago, the OG starters, but for the season they're still I think like minus 15 net rating, and it's just not been a good lineup. I think my thing I'm most interested in, we're going to talk about the final 10 games, so I don't want to spoil that, but like I think the thing I'm going to be most closely watching down the stretch of the season is the defensive side, because again, if we isolate the 12-1 stretch, which is they win the 3 games, they lose the close game to Denver, then they have the 9-game win streak. They are 7th in defense over that stretch. But you add in last night, they jumped to 10th in defense, and that just shows you how one game can really shift the defensive ratings when you're dealing with a relatively small sample. But even looking at like post All-Star break, they're 14th. And that's like, I think that's in line with what's probably realistic based on the personnel with this group. But I think 4th in offense, 14th in defense post All-Star break, that's probably like closer to their ceiling on both sides of the ball. I think they could be even better offensively, be maybe the number 2 or number 3 offense. And then defensively, 12th to 15th kind of feels about right if they're firing on all cylinders. But I am brought back to last season when they had that stretch of 24 games. They go 20-4. They have the league's best defense. And there was some shot variance going in their favor. And it was kind of similar of opponents just did not shoot well against them over that stretch. And then on like both before that and after that, opponents shot much better. And then we saw that carry over into the postseason where they lost in 5. So I'm just curious at the defensive level, especially as JJ shortens the rotation since the Denver game. He's been going with 9 guys and pretty consistently, like only 1, maybe 2 bench guys are hitting that 18-minute, 20-minute plus mark. As he's tightened the rotation, you look at the guys he trusts, it's the starters plus Rui and Luke, and then to a lesser degree, Jackson, and to an even lesser degree, Jake. And there's just not a lot of defense in that top 9 to the point of like they are so dependent on Marcus Smart. and so dependent on the big three providing a certain amount of defense plus all the offense that they're carrying. So it's like, I still wonder if like the defense with this group is the ultimate Achilles heel of, I think their offense can get to such a high level where they can win a playoff round, but as they get deeper in the playoffs and they reach San Antonio or OKC, the lack of defense might ultimately be the thing that just undoes this group. But I mean, do you have anything to add to that before we move to Luka?
No, I agree. And I think also when we are talking about this team, I think, like we said, this recent stretch was certainly positive, made the season much more bearable. But I think some of the limitations that we talked about remain. Even in this game against Detroit, we saw like the gap in physicality. And this is, here I agree with your concerns. When you will play 40 minutes a night, it's tough ask for this, also for the big three to get, let's say, beaten on the offensive and then play with that physicality on the other side. We saw that this group, and this is where, because Marcus is such a tremendous defensive playmaker, and I think some of it really carried over to Luka, to Austin. I think Luka beat his record for season in charges by 10 already. So, and he's getting steals. LeBron increased. He can still make defensively. Austin can take charges. So I think they can generate enough, because I don't think their base defense is strong enough, but they have the talent, individual talent, to generate these steals or blocks or deflections. But it's hard to sustain, like you said. I think it will be hard to sustain if JJ is going back again to playing these guys extensive minutes like it was last year. This is going to be really hard.
I mean, Luka's played 7 straight games of 37 plus minutes, and I just think that's a lot to be putting on him, especially with the defensive ask as well, because I think he's been awesome defensively over the past month or so, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And to ask him to put in that level of defense in addition to the offensive load that he's carrying and play that in 37 to 40 minutes most nights, like, I just think for anybody, that's a really difficult ask. And they have this upcoming stretch here with Indiana and Brooklyn and Washington. Maybe they can have some blowouts and rest Luka and Austin and LeBron in the fourth quarter of some of those games. But even in some of their blowout wins or against lesser teams, JJ hasn't really trusted the bench and has still played the starters deep into the fourth quarter at a rate that, like, I just think they got to be careful with that. You're at the stretch run here. You don't want to risk any injury. You don't want to risk overtaxing the guys, having them being too tired going into game one of the playoffs. Like, I think they just got to be a little bit more delicate with it. But speaking of Luka, you have covered Luka extensively for over a decade. You know him as well as anybody. How would you assess this recent stretch from him of, let's just say like a month or so? I think it kind of shifted in late February, and this MVP push that he's had. But looking at this past month, like, where does it stack up with some of his best stretches of his career? And looking at 2022 and 2024 specifically, and the momentum he was able to have going into the playoffs in both of those years, and the runs that his teams were able to go on, despite on paper not being a conference finals level team, not being a finals level team, leading them deeper than anticipated. What have you seen from him over this past month, and what does this potentially portend for the rest of the Lakers season based on the proof of concept that we have in 2022 and 2024?
No, I think it was, I wrote this summer, I think, like I said, I'm watching him for 10 years, but the man still can amaze you on every given night, right? So it's like he's doing crazy things. And I said this on a couple of other occasions, that even when we talk MVP or best players, I think Luka's ceiling is the highest at times, while maybe he's not as consistent as, I don't know, a Shea or a Jokic. But you can see when, I don't know, he's making the three at 40% rate and he's shooting like Steph Curry volume of 13% to get almost like a Curry shooter, but also the one that is not, that can punish you with size, that can do other things. So it's been crazy. And he had similar runs in the past, to be honest, also with some of the Maverick seasons in the playoffs. I don't know if Laker fans remember his first playoff series against the Clippers, or the second. He was like,
I covered that playoff series against the Clippers. Yeah, that was so impressed with him in his first postseason debut.
And even the second one, I think it was even more crazy when they went Game 7 with the Clippers, and Kawhi played like peak Kawhi, and they were going head to head. And I think in Game 7, Luka had like 40 points or 45 or something. Like, when he goes in these zones, I think it's like I said, I think it also gives confidence to his teammates. To me, what was amazing was watching LeBron, because I think in the season was like a little bit back and forth. And when they were losing, and when Luka was not maybe playing at his best, you could see at times, I don't know, from LeBron's anger, maybe, why would I don't know, totally adjust to this guy or thing like that. But I think in this, when Luka is playing like that, like even LeBron, I think you can see the look on his face is like, this guy is crazy, right? So I think it's real, increases the level of confidence of the whole team. And when he gets in a series like that, again, the last series probably before the finals, the Minnesota series, it was like he was hitting the same shots that he was against Miami, and it was like just over. And the people forget Minnesota was like great team, still is the same team, but they just demolished them in 5 games basically. So I think for Luka, one thing that stood out to me apart from that, because as I said, we saw this in the past stretches like this, but I think physically one of the, let's say, questions going into the season, because a lot of the talk was about his makeover, how he slimmed down, all these Man Health articles. My key question was, can he sustain it through a season? Because we saw him in the past that can be a problem, or for example with some injuries, and he had a couple of them, especially in December, during that stretch, also with personal problems when he went back home, that he didn't look great. But I think what stood out to me during this run was, especially down the stretch of games, he looked great. He didn't look tired, and sometimes, even if I remember watching him playing for Slovenia in the Eurobasket, he get gassed in the fourth quarters, but during this stretch, he had some of the most dominant runs against Houston, against Miami, late in games, and I just thought he looked great. So to me, the key would be for these last couple of games, how to maybe, like you said, find a balance between minutes and load, and trying to race for the third spot, but also getting him fresh for the playoffs, because I think if he looked like he did last month, I think then he can be a best player on the floor in any series. And this is what ultimately I think matters the most. The other part, again, goes, I think it's a small detail, but it's also when I talked about shooting, about Kennard, about Rui, I think he's surrounding much more by shooters and gives him more space. And you can see, especially with Luke, also it was the same with Rui in the past, he's trusting these guys, so he knows where they are and they provide him space, and I think they unlock him on offense. I think JJ realized that, so that's why he leaned so heavily into Luke, for example, compared to, I don't know, Jake or Randall off the bench.
How do you view Luka's place in the MVP race currently? I think Shea is the heavy favorite and is likely going to win, but I've also made the point that he has certainly ascended within the conversation, and I think it was ridiculous that, I mean, even as recently as like a week ago, but certainly like 2-3 weeks ago, people were not talking about him as a first team All-NBA guy or as a top 5 MVP guy. I've been pushing for it. He's clearly a first team All-NBA guy, and I think at points this season, I mean, he's always for me been a top 4 MVP candidate. There's been points where he's been higher, there's been points where he's been lower, but he's been clearly a top 4 at a minimum, if not, the best player, like certainly the past month, I think he's been the best player. And as you noted, like this has been a late MVP push for him. But like, do you think he has a chance to overtake Shea at some point here down the stretch? Like if the Lakers, let's just say hypothetically, go into OKC and beat OKC in that early April matchup, and he outplays Shea head to head, do you think that would be enough to sway voters, or do you think Shea probably just has this locked up because Thunder have been the best team all season? He's been very steady, putting up his 35-5, and it's just he kind of has it on lock.
Yeah, to me it was crazy, probably surprising to me. I think this is a big difference comparing to his Mavericks tenure. Is like when the clash was the backlash that he received during his, let's say, during the stretches that Lakers struggled, was, I think, the worst it's ever been in his career. But now that they've been winning, I think he's getting praise from guys that I never seen him praise before. So the talking heads, I don't know. I saw a Stephen A. Smith segment like Luka should be the MVP. All these guys, all of a sudden, is like Luka should be MVP. So because this award is so narrative driven, I think the analytics crowd, the geeks, they will never give it to Luka because I think Shea and Jokic, they are like the darlings of the metrics. And I agree to some extent, but I also, if you look deeper a little bit into these metrics, they are always a little bit lineup dependent, despite the normalization and stuff like that. And so the key point, I think, if they would continue with this stretch, so if they don't back off, I don't know, if they go 9-1, 8-2, and they finish third, and he continues playing like this, I think he has a chance, which I think is the best we could hope for. But realistically, like we said, it's going to be hard to catch Shea. I think with Shea, if he wants to, let's say, overtake him, these 2 games against OKC will be crucial. If he plays like he did, I don't know, against Houston, if the Lakers, I don't know, they win both games or he outplays Shea, I think the narratives will be, the recent narratives that we hear about Luka, like being the best player, will be even louder. But if they're kind of even, or even OKC wins, I think this is going to be then the end of the discussions, probably. But I think the main 3 guys, even the 4th, I think the Luka, Shea, Jokic, Wemby, it's like crazy. And just being in this, let's say, this group, it's been unbelievable that it's even a debate, because how the season started, I think nobody predicted that. And I think that's what comes with winning. So I think also for Luka, I think this is why he enjoyed winning all these games so much, because I think it gives more exposure to the stuff he's doing. Yeah.
I think this MVP race is going to go down as one of the greatest in NBA history. And I think the most recent comparison to this would be that 2017 MVP race where it was Harden and or 2017 or 2018. I'm blanking on which year it was, but it was like Harden, Kawhi. I think it might have been 2017. That was the year Russ won, but it was Russ ended up winning, but you had Harden having a great season, Kawhi having a great season, LeBron had a great season. You had the Warriors coming off of just got KD, but still those 2 guys, I think for most people were considered top 3 or 4 players in the league. So you just had like an all-time MVP race, and I think we could look back at this MVP race in 5 to 10 years and be like, that was the best season Jokic ever had. That was the best season Shea ever had. Maybe that was the best season Luka ever had. Wemby is still on the ascent, and for me, he's still a little bit behind the pack. I have him 4th right now.
Ask him.
But you could. I mean, people are advocating for Wemby as MVP or second.
He's
behind Shea, so
for himself.
Yeah, he's advocating for himself as well. Like, it's just, this is crazy. And you have 4 guys who I think could all go down as like top 25 players, top 20 players, depending on how the rest of their careers play out. It's just absurd that we have, I think that's the tough part for like 3 of those guys are just, they're not going to win MVP. And it's not because they weren't good enough or they didn't put up a certain amount of numbers. It's just because I think this is an all-time race, and it's really going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But let's shift the focus more toward the future here. And where do you have the Lakers right now in the West? Do you view them as the 3rd best team, as their record indicates, or Denver just got healthy? they've won a couple games in a row, looked pretty good lately. And even looking at this recent stretch here of when I was just comparing the Lakers and some of their stuff to some of the other teams, like Denver's quietly kind of been around top 10 defense as well lately, and that they haven't had Peyton Watson until recently. Minnesota and Houston, Houston's been trying to get the wrong direction. Minnesota, ants out, although they've been winning without him, but like, you just never know what you're getting from them. But where do you view the Lakers right now in the West hierarchy overall with 10 games left in the regular season?
So, I mean, not standing related, just like...
Yeah, just overall.
Yeah. I think they're like that in that group with Houston and Minnesota. Like you said, I think Denver, when fully healthy, I think they have just much more... I was talking about before about Lakers finally building some chemistry, continuity, and I think this starting five build like almost 400 possessions, which is still a very small sample size for the best lineups, but it's big for Lakers. But if you look at Denver, I think Jokic and Murray and Gordon has been now playing together for 5 years, and they're just such a well-oiled machine, and I think fully healthy, I think they're still I would have them as the second best team in the conference. What I would say is that Luka and especially Luka-led Lakers, and even Luka in the past has always been a tough matchup for Jokic, because any great pick and roll ball handler, Curry, Harden, is a bad matchup for Jokic because he has trouble defending this, and then they have to show two guys on the ball, and then they scramble all the time. But I think overall, I think quality-wise, I think the Denver is the second best team in the conference. I think I don't trust Houston at all. We saw in these two games against the Lakers, they have problems troubleshooting. They have problems with KD as the main hub, as the creator on offense, and Şengün is a problem on defense. And then because they lack playmaking, they have to play Shepherd, which the Lakers attacked all the time. So I trust Houston the least out of all these teams. And then Minnesota, I think they have, again, a lot of continuity defensively, especially with Rudy. They know what they're doing. I think the Sumno pickup has been good for them. But this group with Lakers, Houston, and Minnesota, they're like just there below the top. And the Spurs, I think they look scary. Bambi looks scary, but I would still like to see them, again, like I said, for Houston, troubleshoot in the playoff series. We saw some of the gimmicks that teams do to Wemby in different games. So we will see. I think they're two young guys. They're also very young. So Castle and Harper. Castle is a streaky shooter, so I think this will get tested in the playoffs. So that's why I would say have them a little bit before. I would actually have them closer to this other group than to the Denver and the OKC at the top.
I've gone back and forth. Denver to me has been a really tough team to assess in all of this because they just haven't been healthy. If you go back to their primary starting group and in some of the lineups earlier in the season, they were a top 10 defense. We just saw a really small sample size with that. And there's no assurance that they're healthy and able to stay healthy into the playoffs. It's just been a challenge for them all season. So they're the toughest team for me to peg because I agree that I think if every team is firing on all cylinders and it's just like straight up ceiling, I think Denver has the second highest ceiling in the West. But are you going to get that version? Are they able to get the continuity and the health down the stretch here? I know they just got healthy, but like, can they sustain that down the stretch?
Aaron Gordon is their Marcus Smart.
Hamstring, like, they need Aaron Gordon. I think they need Peyton Watson too, especially with Cam Johnson. Has had some better moments recently, but he's not quite what he's not been Michael Porter Jr. and he's not been exactly what they were hoping he would be up to this point. So Denver to me is like, they're a variance team where you could tell me they're second or you could tell me they're fourth, but they're somewhere in there. Spurs, I want to believe in the Spurs. I do believe in the Spurs to a degree. I think that the two big questions for me with them are just like, one, they don't have the experience of the primary rotation guys outside of Harrison Barnes. just don't have the collective playoff experience. And NBA history suggests these young teams that have a bunch of regular season success typically lose in round 2 or round 3 in their first playoff run, and then they build on that, and it's like a 2 to 3 year process to get to the finals or to get to winning a title. So I think San Antonio, I would not be surprised if they made the conference finals, or maybe even if they made the finals and won the title. It's just, if you look at like 10 years ago, the Warriors and their ascension, it was like second round, first round, championship. More recently, Boston was in the conference finals. OKC, well, yeah, I was going to say, like Boston, multiple conference finals, won finals, and then they eventually broke through, won the title. Denver had a conference finals, then a couple of like gap years, then won the title. And then OKC most recently with first round, second round championship. So like these things take time, and San Antonio is ahead of schedule. So maybe Wemby is that great where they can do it.
They remind me of that OKC, that team that lost to Dallas in the second round, because they were like this juggernaut first seed. I think they won tons of games. They always played hard. And I think in today's NBA, these young teams, they play hard, they play defense, they will win tons of games. But you could see that team had a couple of goals, especially on playmaking and passing, and that Dallas exposed. And then they added Hartenstein, Caruso, and the young guys made even further growth. So I think they are, San Antonio, I think, is in a similar spot. I think they have some holes, but it will be interesting. It will be interesting because I think stylistically these teams are so different. If you look at OKC, Denver, San Antonio, even the Lakers, that's going to make these playoffs and matchups very fun. So hopefully the Lakers get there in their best possible version, because I think they could make a competitive series against most of these teams.
I agree. I think Denver would be a very close series that could go in either direction. And then San Antonio, I would favor San Antonio ahead of the Lakers. But I mean, I would not be surprised if Luka is clearly the best player in that series and the Lakers pull off the upset. A couple more before we get into the Q&A. How would you rank the 3 potential first round opponents from best matchup to worst matchup for the Lakers? Houston, Minnesota, and Denver.
So yeah, I would take Houston, like I said, most preferred. They have limitations, and you can see missing Steven Adams, their superpower, which was like just crush you with size, beat you up, getting every single offensive rebound. It's not the same anymore. So they miss him big time. And I just don't trust their decision-making process on offense. And they have, for example, for the Lakers, like we saw in the series, if they play 2 of their top, they have great defenders. I think Amen and Osar are, to me, the 2 guys that I really watch in you. Just the freakish athletes, how do they defend? Tari Eason is a great defender. They have great wing defenders. But 2 of their top 6 guys, Şengün and Shepard, they can be attacked, and they will be attacked by Luka, by Austin, by LeBron. So they cannot be that imposing to you defensively. Then second, probably I would take Minnesota. And then lastly, Denver. I think Minnesota, even last year, if people remember the 4-1, but I think that series was much closer than the end results. And they just missed the size. They were beaten up. So even this version of DeAndre Ayton helps. We saw him play well against Rudy, because Rudy cannot shove him aside. He has the size. So I think that helps. And also having more clear, better version of Luka than he was last year. And I think just a little bit, Marcus Smart, I think, is better than Dorian was last year. So I think it's a better option against Ant. So I would rather see them than Denver. And then Denver, like I said, it would be just a crazy series.
The offensive fireworks in that series would be really fun. And just the greatness of Luka versus Jokic like that. I mean, we saw what that game was in LA. Sign me up for 7 games of that. That would be fun. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think Houston, I recently said this on a show. I would pick the Lakers over the Rockets in 5. I would pick the Lakers over the Wolves in 6. And I think Lakers Nuggets is a 7-game series that I want to see where both teams are at going into the first round before I make a decisive pick there. But, I think that could go either way. And then final one before we get into the Q&A. What are you looking forward to most over the final 10 games of the season here? Lakers have this little easy pocket of the schedule coming up at Indiana, Brooklyn, and Washington. Then they play Cleveland, OKC, Dallas, and OKC. So 3 of those 4 games, twice OKC, 1 Cleveland. That's a pretty tough stretch there. And then closing it out against Golden State, Phoenix, and Utah. So I believe from a strength of schedule perspective, in terms of opponent win percentage, they have the 4th easiest remaining schedule. I think they have 6 games there. They should easily win with Indiana, Brooklyn, Washington, Dallas, Utah, I guess 5. And then like Golden State or Phoenix, they should at least split those 2, if not win both. So, I mean, you could talk me into basically 7 games they'll be heavily favored in or favored in. And then Cleveland, OKC, and OKC are the 3 where we'll see, like, those are statement games. We'll see how they match up with 2 of the best teams in the league. But what are you looking forward to most to just put a bow on this check-in?
Yeah, I would really love to see them finish this season strong. Even when we're talking about MVP case, I think they are now at 46 wins, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So
46 and 26.
Let's say if they go 8-2, you're up to 54, which would be amazing for this team. This would be like
great
crazy
season, yeah.
A great season, and nobody would have expected it, and it would like really shift a lot of narratives. Even 7-3, I think 53 win. I think even 52, 53 win is still a great season. But that is the most. I think realistically, what matters the most going into the playoffs is, we said, I think they found the formula that works for them with the starting 5, with the rotation, with these roles, adjusted roles. So I think just seeing more of it, building even more continuity, even more chemistry, and then preserve a little bit of the freshness, a little bit of the legs for the playoff rounds. I think JJ said last year, I think they looked a little, because they made this huge push, because Luka joined. I think they were pushing it really hard, and then they took the week before the first round a little bit easier. At least that's what he said. I think they need to find the best formula, how to get in best possible shape. I think it matters a lot with Marcus. It matters a lot with LeBron. And like I said before, it matters a lot with Luka. So I think them trying to find the best possible version physically, because we see him with Luka, if he's at his peak level physically, then everything is possible. Marcus has been such a great story. It would be a shame that he gets banged up in the playoffs. And LeBron, of course, he's doing crazy stuff at this age, but he's 41. So a little tweak, I can tell you, at this age takes forever to heal. So I think, not that I would compare myself to the best athlete in the history.
But, talk your talk.
Yeah. But having a little bit of sciatica issues, I can tell you, it's like it hurts. So I think for them just trying to get, because I think with all the talk about this team, about what's going to happen with LeBron, if he's going to be on this team or not, I think just if this is his last season, for example, in LA, I think they're having a strong season and a good show in the playoff. I think he deserves it.
Agreed. All right, let's get into the Q&A here. We're going to go about 15 or so minutes. First one from Brandon. Thank you for the super chat. Can we stop playing Jake? I don't trust him come playoffs. Obviously, playoff dropper. Also, Vando got to be in for defensive possessions over Jake. Just don't see it with Jake. So I know a lot of the fan base has been down on Jake with the shooting struggles. And like last night, I actually thought it was more, he was fine offensively. It was actually the defensive end where he just could not handle Jenkins and struggling with foul trouble and just was not like we saw him in the Marcus role, and he was not Marcus Smart. But with this comment and just sort of the overall conversation with Jake right now, where are you at with him, and where do you see him factoring in the playoff rotation?
Yeah, no, first of all, I would say he played a crazy important role this year. He played so many minutes, all the games. As I said, second, I think, in total minutes. So hats off to him. And I think it's the playoffs. It's gonna be a huge test for him. He's one of the guys that has contract beyond, so for next season as well. And we saw it with JJ. He will remove you from the playoff rotation very fast. So I think I'm looking forward to see, because Jake is still a young player. I have trust in him. I like him. I like his hustle. I like his skill set. I think, especially on his contract, he can be a useful rotation piece. But we saw his confidence with his shot, with his decision-making, shoot versus drive, or some of the turnovers. It can get costly in the playoffs. So I would like to see him. I still think, if you look at both sides of the ball, I still think JJ is right to playing him over Vando, but it's gonna be interesting. I think first couple of games in the playoffs is gonna be a lot. First couple of shots, if he makes them, I think it's gonna be very important for him.
I think based on JJ's recent rotation, I know he got the start last night, but he's been more the ninth man. If you've looked at it from the Denver game, he's reduced it to 9 players. And Jake has often been the guy who's played the fewest amount of minutes, somewhere in that like 12 to 15, maybe 16 minute range. So I think based on that, it might end up being a situation where it's the 5 starters, it's Rui, it's Luke, it's Jackson, and then maybe Jake is like a 1 to 2 shift player, depending on how he's playing. I agree with everything you said. I think he's been better. There's just a lot that he does that does not show up in the box score, and a lot that he does that I think you have to be paying attention to. And if you're just judging him on his offensive contributions, scoring, and shooting, yes, I think he's been a disappointment. Like, he shot 42% last year on threes. This year he's shooting 32%. And you know, it's still low volume in both instances. And maybe there's just some variance there with him, but he has not been like, I think the Lakers wanted him to be a clear positive on both sides of the basketball. And while I think he's been a nice connector offensively, and the passing and some of the reads he makes and the bully ball have been useful, I don't think he's been like a clear positive on that side of the ball. Defensively, I think he's been solid, and the playmaking, the steals, the deflections, the rebounding, like I think he's been a positive there. But offensively, I think he has left something on the table. So yeah, I mean, I just think he's probably the 9th man, 8th and 8.5 man, whatever, and maybe more of a 1 to 2 shift player depending on the matchup. And but I think with Vando, situationally, if like one possession stop, I would agree that I'd probably rather have Vando out there for like a given possession. But I've already talked about the reason JJ didn't use the timeout and didn't go to Vando. I think they wanted to save it for the final 10 seconds and like how it ended up playing out. And I think ultimately JJ just doesn't really trust Vando. I think we've seen it where he's the 10th man.
And I think he's right. I think the drop off offensively between Jake and Vando is bigger than it is if you look at defense. Even VJ shooting teams still don't leave him completely open. I think
teams don't guard Vando. They just don't respect Vando as a shooter.
That's very tough with the Lakers playing other bigs.
It basically turns to 4-on-5 on offense. Next one from the Billy 0304. Thank you for the super chat. Downfall will be minutes played. Young teams will tire them out in the playoffs. Seeding won't matter when they can't defend or score with no legs at end of game. So we kind of talked about this earlier. They got to be careful here with the minutes, and I really implored JJ to, if they're up, because again, it's not. He done it a little bit more, but they had that stretch where they won the 3 games before the 9-game win streak. He did, I think, one of those games, or actually 2 of those games, Luka didn't play in the 4th quarter. He got him some rest, and it was like, okay, even the Indiana game, I think he played him a lot of, like 32 of the 36, and then didn't play him again in the 4th. I think we'll see some of that hopefully coming up here, but they just got to be careful. I don't think you want to be playing Luka 38, 39 minutes every game down the stretch going into round one. It's just that's very taxing on him. And also Austin. I mean, Austin just played 40 minutes in back-to-back games. Like, I just think I know they want to win. Every game is a must-win, but
I think
you can tone the minutes down a little bit.
One game with that, I think with Luka especially, because it's not relevant for Austin and LeBron. I think Luka has like 5 more games that he can miss. So he has, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he has to play 4 more games to be eligible for the awards. I think he's somewhere at around 61 or 60. So maybe they sit
He's
him
at
out.
60. So yeah, he's got 5 more games.
5
and
more
I
games.
assume he'll play in most of the games, if not all.
He will, but as I said, maybe down the stretch, last game, maybe he can sit out a game or things like that. But yeah, they need to. We talked about that. They need to get really the best possible physical state in the first round.
And I will also note, like, I agree the team has looked more tired recently. And I think we also saw this a little bit last year where they played so hard for that middle portion of the season that it eventually caught up to them. I feel like there's been a little bit of that here recently where the group, because they don't naturally have a bunch of high motor guys and they don't have the best defensive personnel in terms of point of attack and keeping the ball in front, it does lend itself to, we've seen JJ with the zone or the trapping or some of the more aggressive schemes and the constant switching. Like, they are in scenarios where they maybe are expending more energy defensively, and that can be taxing on your legs. So that is something that I like, I mentioned earlier in the show, the defense is something I'm going to monitor down the stretch. I think the fatigue and where the legs are at are going to be a big thing as well. But we also can't overlook, like, they're 22-7 in the clutch. So they have been in situations where it's a close game. They're tired. They've played, 42 of the 48 minutes and they still close out a game in the clutch. So they have been successful in close games. It's just, it is something to monitor in terms of the fatigue and the minutes. Next one from my mom, aka Mama Buha here. Nice to see Buha's block at a time I can watch. LOL. I think Lakers can take on the Spurs. I am a believer. LOL. Also, let's get the likes up. Thanks. I've noticed that, like, a lot of optimism from the fan base in that potential 2-3 matchup against the Spurs in round 2. I said right now I would lean Spurs in 6 over the Lakers. I think a few weeks ago that would have been Spurs in 5 over the Lakers, but the Lakers have a decisive experience advantage in that potential matchup. You have LeBron, who's been to the finals 10 times, won 4 titles. You have Luka, who's been to the finals, been to the conference finals. You have Marcus, who's been to the finals, been to multiple conference finals. Austin, Rui, Vando have all been to the conference finals, multiple playoff trips. You compare that to, De'Aaron Fox, been to 1 playoffs and lost in 7 in round 1. Wemby's not played in the playoffs. Harper and Castle and, like, several of their primary guys have not even been to the playoffs yet. So with that theoretical round 2 matchup, how do you currently see that playing out?
Yeah, no, I think also Wemby, as great as he is defensively, they still don't like him scramble defense too high, get him cross match up with Luka or things like that. So I think this is also something to look for in this kind of matchups. Also, Fox, he's a smaller guard who, again, you can aim at and attack on defense. I'm huge fan of Castle. I think he's one of the best defenders.
I love Castle.
In the NBA.
Castle's great.
Yeah, so I think he's really great. But again, it's the series that these young guys, the shooting gets tested. I saw, like I said, I think we saw it before with younger teams. You can have a bad shooting stretch, and this is when things get tight. So I think I don't have them that big of a favorite. I think it would be pretty even series with LA. Also, the games that LA played, I think the one that they lost was where they were like at their worst, like Spurs just beat them in transition. And I think in the playoffs, this is something that they will fix, or it will be much tougher to do. So we'll see. I think it could be a potential 2-3 matchup in the second round. So I would be really like to see. I was joking before with Wemby making his own case, but I think this is one thing that it's I think Wemby is great, and how thoughtful it is, how much he puts in the game and everything. But I think this is a team a little bit with his career that's, if you compare him to Luka, it's totally opposite. Basically, I think a lot of the accolades have been given to him before he actually won anything. Even in Europe, they built his team to prepare him for the NBA. Spurs tanked to get the teams around him. And I think now it's going to be a lot of pressure on him to deliver on this expectation that he's kind of put on himself. We saw him, he can do it. They had, let's, for example, a great NBA Cup run or games against OKC. But we also saw the finals against the New York, where he struggled against Mitchell Robinson on the glass, physicality. I don't know if you remember the first game that Lakers beat them. DeAndre Ayton was great against him on the glass because he just pushed him around. So I think it's going to be I think it's going to be more, despite the Lakers having LeBron James and Luka and everybody, I think in that series, it's going to be more pressure on Wemby than on anybody else, because if he loses, the narratives, will start, okay, can he really do it in the playoffs, and all these things that happen to all young players until they win a series or two.
Agreed. Yeah. I think I had mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the Spurs, and then we shifted the conversation, but I mentioned the experience. And the other thing for me is just going to be how their late game offense functions, where they might pass with flying colors, and it might be funneling everything through Wemby or Fox, or maybe it's a little bit more matchup based. But I think there's a clear, like, the Lakers are going to run things through Luka down the stretch. Denver's going to run things through Jokic with the Jokic-Murray two-man game. And then OKC is going to run things through Shea. And there's proven results in all three of those strategies. With the Spurs, it's just a bit of a wild card that we don't know, right? And they've had a lot of blowouts. They've been dominant. But if you're down 2-1 in a series and it's game 4 on the road and you're down 4 with 3 minutes left, like, how are they performing in that scenario? We just don't know the answer to that, right? So I think, again, with like an OKC, a Denver, those are championship cores. That OKC is the defending champs. Denver won a couple years ago, but like, you have a little bit more confidence
and also
in like the core there.
The 3-point shot, we were talking about Luka, how when the step back is falling, how it unlocks his game. And I think against Wemby, when basically the guy had just take the paint away, I think it's difficult to score in the paint. Having a guy who can, I don't know, pull up 13 times from free and make them, it's something that is like the way to punish that defense. And that is not what many teams have. It's, of course, risky because it's shot dependent, but it's something that Luka can do. And this is something that, again, it's much more difficult than for San Antonio to have Wemby roam around or pack the paint when you're worried that the guy will pull up from behind the arc.
Then Hectic said, agreed. I think this is when we were talking about the first round matchups order. He agreed with us. So appreciate the super chat there. And then a couple more here. This one I found interesting from James Michael Santiago. So don't need to go into detail, but can we ask Iztok how Luka is covered in Slovenia in terms of the recent personal news? Are they giving his family more privacy on this? And this is in contrast to, you've seen TMZ, they're going to Luka's house and photographing him, and it's been just utterly ridiculous. But how I guess I don't want to go into what has transpired, but just the basic like coverage of it. How has it been in Slovenia, and how has it maybe contrasted with the coverage in the US?
Yeah, I think it's not to the level of the TMZ. So I think some of the news which was interesting actually came up, like media quoting the TMZ or other media from the US. So I think in a way, Luka is such a star, or such a, let's say, national pride, that I think that he gotten some more leash on this. So I think it certainly hasn't been as bad as this. And also, which was kind of surprising because Slovenia is a very small country and a lot of this stuff, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. So I was even surprised that some of this didn't leak out, came in the media before it got, and basically in the US. I think it was like actually media waiting for the news to come up, like, and then they started to talk about it. So it's certainly, I think it's better, but there are, of course, then he's still the, let's say, most famous personality in Slovenia, I would say. And of course, there is talk, and everybody is then talking about it and things like that. So that's for sure. It's not that it's completely neglected or not being in the media.
Next one from Christian. Isn't the fact that the Spurs and OKC have the best and deepest teams in the NBA should diminish Wemby and SGA's MVP chances? Luka's taking the Lakers to a place no one thought possible. So I think this would be, if you're making the case for Luka, this is one of the things in his favor. I would note that for as low as people were on the Lakers going into the season, people were even lower on the Spurs. I off the top of my head, I cannot think of a preseason projection. I know like ESPN had their simulations where I think the Spurs were ahead of the Lakers. But if you're talking like power rankings or projecting the playoff seeds, Lakers were ahead of the Spurs in basically every projection. So I will like, I know now that we have the context of the season the Spurs have had, we see the depth and the talent in how they've put it together. But I would slightly push back on that of just, I think expectations were higher for the Lakers than the Spurs going into the season. But I mean, even like once it became clear the Spurs were great, the Lakers were still kind of teetering there in that like 5-6 range, and people weren't as high on them. And then Luka has carried this stretch that has changed the season. So, but this is part of the argument for Luka, is that he's doing more with less, or doing more above expectations than less. But than the other two. But what's your take on this?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say talent, although in OKC's case certainly is also the talent question. But it's the thing that I was talking about before. It's the infrastructure, and I think, for example, here even more OKC and Jokic, Shea and Jokic, they have these teams, they have the system, they have the infrastructure in place that doesn't change. So have this stability, which I think is really undervalued when we talk about NBA. And Spurs, even though they have, let's say, a little bit younger, more new team, but I think their infrastructure is also has been building up ever since Wemby got there. And I think they're a very smart organization, and they just added pieces around. As for the Lakers, we saw, like I said before, this was a team that basically signed 2 players off the buyout market. Also, if you look at the whole contract situation, which we saw it was problematic during the season, it was the team that knows, that won't stick up, that is not there for the long run, which in any of these teams is not. So I think in that regard, the infrastructure, if you look at the infrastructure, for sure, Luka's and Lakers' case is much more difficult. And this, I think, is what people don't talk about when we talk about the media, when we talk about how individuals are portrayed, because it's much easier to perform every day if your infrastructure is stable, if you have very clear roles, if you have a very clear future, than when it is basically with the Lakers, when every day the talk is just what will happen in the summer, how everybody will be gone, will they sign Giannis, whatever will come, and when you have like 2 new guys trying to plug them in, I think that it's not only about Luka. I think it also speaks a lot about JJ and the job that the whole coaching staff has done to keep this somehow in control, not to totally explode during the crisis periods, and now have the success that they have with this current setup and current environment.
I agree. Final one here from Pinty23. Hi, Iztok. Good show. Beat the Pacers. Get Bonga. So Isaac
this
Bonga.
This is my friend from Germany.
Okay. Yeah.
He's been advocating for Lakers to sign Isaac Bonga for a long time, and I think he's playing great. Ex-Laker legend, he's playing great in Europe. So he's one of these guys like Yabusele or Dante Exum, that return to Europe, and I could see them return back to NBA at some point.
And he won Finals MVP there a few months ago, 6 months ago.
You mean Eurobasket?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, Eurobasket MVP. Or yeah.
No, not the MVP. Schroeder won that, but he was on that title team that won the title with Germany.
Okay, then what I just Googled is wrong, but that shows you what you get when you Google something on the spot.
Maybe I'm wrong,
but
I
yeah,
know.
I mean,
maybe some other.
Well, it said he won the tournament MVP 6 months ago for Eurobasket, but I don't know if that I'm not seeing it in anyway. I mean he fits the profile of the type of guy the Lakers could use, and especially if he's on a minimum contract, that could be an option for Pinty says finals MVP is right. Okay, so it was the finals MVP. Cool. But Iztok, thank you so much for your time. I know it's now past 10 p.m. there, so thank you for hanging out with the late night gang. Anything you want to plug, I will be linking Diggin' Basketball and your Substack in the show notes, but anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, that's great. I think everybody who want to follow my work, I'm, like you said, one of the rare guys that still write a lot. So throwback, Diggin' Basketball is the place. And I'm always happy to talk to anybody about basketball, other stuff on X or Twitter. Yeah.
Well, I am a proud subscriber. I love your work. It's a must read after every game. So I recommend everybody subscribe. And we will have to do this again. I do an annual playoff preview with Cranjis, but I would love to have you on maybe after game 1 or game 2 of the first round, and then we can rehash whatever's transpired up to that point. But it's been way too long. I think our last one was December, so it's been a few months, but great to see you, great to talk to you, and would love to have you back on during the playoffs. For those watching on YouTube right now, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow after Lakers Pacers. I will talk to you all then.